Welcome to another episode of Talking College Football with JJ Kitchen. Of course, I'm your host, JJ Kitchen. Guys, we got ourselves a great show for you guys, and bringing someone on here that one I consider as a dear friend, but someone who really has the knowledge of the WPIAL, Pitt, college football, and someone that I think most Pitt fans will understand who he is, unless you were living under a rock. This individual is going to be really good to have on here. But first up, before we even get started, you guys always know the show is sponsored by Colonial Beer, located at 4986 Library Road in Bethel Park, PA 15102. Guys, tremendous people. Got to meet up with Bill yesterday. We got to watch a little bit of the Coastal Carolina baseball game in the College World Series. Talked a lot of Pitt football, things that are going on behind the scenes. But truly, they're great people. And when you go into their Colonial Beer, plenty of different selections between your lighter beers, your heavier lagers, things of that nature. They have plenty of different selections. Make sure you go see Colonial Beer, located at 4986 Library Road in Bethel Park, PA 15102. Tremendous Pitt people. They're Pitt men, but also great donators to Pitt athletics. Make sure you go see them today. The show is also sponsored by Thompson Law Group with Brian Thompson, an attorney on your side. Call them at 724-799-8404 or visit them at thompsonattorney.com. Again, a lot of you have gotten to see Brian at the football games, at the spring game, an easy person to talk to, an easy person to approach. But more importantly, he cares about you, the individual. Unlike a lot of other people and a lot of other law firms that are much larger than Brian, Brian cares about you, the individual, and cares about the results that you need in the case that you desire. Again, Brian is an incredible individual, family-oriented, comes from a great family, and takes care of the people that are around him, especially his clients. Make sure you go see Thompson Law Group with Brian Thompson at 724-799-8404 or visit them at thompsonattorney.com. And lastly, the show is sponsored by the Cake Collection by Austin Kitchen, my younger brother with the Seattle Mariners, and their organization. A very cool experience, very cool. The Cake Collection coffee brand by Austin Kitchen at www.thekingscraft.com. It's the black bag, and again, a great design, the backwards K for a looking strikeout, a very cool design. Personally, this is my personal favorite. The AK Espresso gets me going in the morning, and if it can fuel a professional athlete, it can certainly fuel me and you. So again, the Cake Collection, go see them at www.thekingscraft.com. Well, guys, the individual we have coming on here today, to give you an idea, if you were living under a rock and you do not know who this individual is, he started WPIAL Insider in 2012. If you can imagine how long ago that was, he's really been a pioneer in this space when it comes to Western Pennsylvania and giving kids an opportunity to get more visibility to Power 4, Group of 5, FCS, Division 2, Division 3, doesn't matter. He was an undergrad at the Duquesne Dukes for 4 years. In that time period, in 4 years, he was a video coordinator, operations specialist, and an assistant coach. He's also an NEC champion in 2015 as a result of his works from operations to recruiting. In 2016 to 2017, he worked for the Toledo Rockets in the Group of 5 in the MAC Conference, led the Rockets to multiple overall 9-win seasons and the best recruiting class in the MAC in his last year there. Then was fortunate enough to come home to the 2018 to 2023, joined the Pittsburgh Panthers, and was originally brought on as a recruiting assistant, but then promoted in that time period as an assistant director of player personnel. Just to name some of the players that this individual has helped recruit to the University of Pittsburgh, and I know there's going to be some names you guys know. A great experience getting Haba Baldonado, Kalijah Cansey, Jordan Addison, Eric Hallett, Servassier Dennis, Cameron Lindsay, and plenty more. When you look at this individual, he's not just an expert in college football, but the work that he does with the WPIAL and getting people and to understand that Pennsylvania is a great state for football, but it's Western Pennsylvania that provides the best. And that is Karlo Zovko, WPIAL Insider. Brother, welcome to the show.
JJ, thanks for having me. That's quite the intro. I need you as my hype man, my media man. That was great.
Well, we try our best, and I can tell you this, man. I know, I'm busy. You're certainly busy. The amount of work that you do on a different scale with, the WPIAL Insider, starting that in 2012, and, the work you're doing outside of college football, you're a pretty busy guy. So I can just truly appreciate you coming on here, man, and cannot thank you enough. And, and just to start it off here, we'll get to the comment section, guys, here as we get through all the topics and whatnot tonight. But let's just talk about first up. I mean, the WPIAL Insider, you started in 2012 and you get here to 2025. I mean, you have over 60,000 followers on WPIAL Insider. And recently you just signed a Pitt great, I think, honestly, in my opinion, a tremendous football athlete. Paris Ford from the Pitt Panthers and his former time as a safety. Talk about what it's like, that journey from 2012 to now, where you're literally running a business.
Yeah, one of my best friends, Nick Leonello, and myself, we started it in our dorm rooms at Duquesne. Honestly, it was kind of a joke when we started it. Everybody was telling us, "Hey, we're sick of you guys talking about high school football and recruiting on Twitter. Like, we're just going to unfollow you." So we said, "Fine, we'll make our own separate account." And it just got absolutely massive. Now, one of our best friends was Pat Quiron, who was a long snapper at Pitt back in the day, back in 2012 through 2016. And he was suite mates actually with Russell Shell his freshman year. And that's what kind of put WPIAL Insider on the map. We broke Russell Shell transferring. And little did we know, Pat Quiron got in big trouble because he told us, and it was like midnight. We immediately put it out. It just blew up. And, Shell told Pat, that he was packing his bags. He was leaving. He was transferring. So we had it first. And that's what kind of put WPIAL Insider on the map. And it just kind of snowballed from there. I took a couple years off, obviously, when I was in college football, like the actual, and when I was at Toledo and Pitt. But yeah, it snowballed quite well and has turned into a nice, legitimate business that I put a lot of time and effort into. It's a lot of fun doing it as well. So, yeah, I enjoy WPIAL Insider. I certainly enjoy it more than college football. I know that sounds crazy to think, but my heart's in high school football. It always has been, always will be. So that's where I make all the bread and butter right there is high school, not college.
Yeah, and I can tell you, the amount of players when you look at, the high school level at Western Pennsylvania. I mean, the amount of guys, whether it's the camps that you're running now, and just honestly, just putting the focal point in Western Pennsylvania, the amount of work that you've done. I mean, you're a guy that, your history and your resume speaks for itself. I mean, what talent looks like. Guys that can go to the Power 4 level, guys can go to the Group of 5, the FCS. I mean, in your history, just putting out some of those names there, you guys had some great players. I mean, especially back in the day when you had Matt Campbell and obviously Jason Candle took over. Mm-hmm. You've had some tremendous football players through there. But it's also cool to see you now, obviously out of college athletics and into more of the focal point of high school athletics. And, again, it was really cool. I got to watch the full interview, with Paris Ford, and you talk about, your heart's into high school football. You got to talk to him a lot about his high school experience. Then he got to talk a little bit more about, which I thought he was pretty truthful with, the decision-making of going to Pitt and why it was so important to go to Pitt. He stayed there, but if the transfer portal was there, he probably hops in the portal.
Oh, yeah,
and
he would have been in for sure.
and I think we both agree with that. That would have been 100%, especially after that first year. And then also,
really, first 2 years. That second year was even worse than the first.
Yeah. And I think that you look at both of those years, he was beyond unhappy. Plenty of us heard about that. And then the fact that, he did talk about how, he made a massive mistake leaving Pitt early. Mm-hmm. Talk about that interview, and just overall, I thought he was pretty truthful and upfront with a lot of the stuff he talked about, and just talk about what it's like to bring him on board where, he's a great kid. At the end of the day, he's a great kid. And I think that bringing a WPIAL kid like that on from Pitt, just talk about that a little bit, because I know fans were certainly talking about it.
Yeah, Paris is one of those players that just lights up a room. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be Paris Ford, the football player. It has to be Paris Ford, the person, right? Yeah. And, I grew to know and love Paris. I was with Paris for 4 years at Pitt. That was my guy. And I know things didn't end the correct way. If you look at college football in history, you could make the claim Kenny Pickett didn't really end great at Pitt either. He opted out of bowl game. People were mad at Kenny, and think about all the accomplishments Kenny has. But, not everything ends how it's not the storybook fairy tale ending. That's just reality. That is what it is. Paris tried to make a business decision. I think he regrets the things that he did. And, with a guy like Paris, in a personality like Paris, he needs to be on the right track. He needs somebody kind of guiding him a little bit. He got into some legal trouble last year. I'm sure everybody knows the legal trouble he got into. Yeah. I went over his house before I hired him on the WPIAL Insider. I sat with him and his dad, sat with them for 2 hours, just talking about, what I think of Paris Ford, the person. I'm not looking for Paris Ford, the football player. I'm looking for Paris Ford, the person that I know that goes into a room, lights up a room, and people gravitate towards him. And I think is going to be a massive signing. I people love me in Western Pennsylvania because I can talk WPIAL football 1A through 6A. Now, obviously, 4, 5, and 6A, those are the key ones to know. Those are bigger schools. I try to do my best with small schools. Paris is going to help with those small schools because he came from a small school himself. So, yeah, I don't. I mean, some people, there were a lot of negative comments, and I understand why. I when I hired him, I knew that was coming, and I told him we're going to have to deal with some flack, and we're all good with it. I think Paris Ford needs to be in the game of football one way or the other. I wish he would have another shot at it. Wish he would have another crack at it. Reality is, I don't know if he's going to get one. He dug himself in a deep hole, but guess what? He got a shovel and he got a work ethic, and he's going to try to get himself out. So that's really all I think. I have a small little platform. Anything that can help him, I'm like, yeah, why would I not help this kid? Me and Paris go way back. I have faith in him. I know he's not going to do me wrong. I know he's going to give his full 100% effort. And at the end of the day, I said we have to address the Pitt stuff on the podcast, and he did. And I thought that he was honest and truthful. I mean, he could have absolutely came on and bashed Narduzzi and bashed, Bates and Sanders, because at the end of the day, he was an All-American the year he played, and he didn't play the year prior. He should have been playing somewhere. But he was a grown adult, grown boy. He took his medicine. He understood why he didn't play, and I thought it was good. I think it's going to be very good. I'm happy to have Paris.
Yeah, and I think that just overall talks about just you as an individual. And I've said this before. I mean, I've always had raving reviews of everything you've done. But the fact is that, not allowing, and I think me and you were very much the same in that world of, look, we get a lot of negative comments, anything from, the Penn State trolls, the West Virginia trolls. You're going to get all those people out there. There's plenty of them. It's a little, they're certainly a little weird, but, hey, we allow it.
Yep.
But the fact is, though, that you understand, hey, you know what? I mean, leadership is, it's not a noun, it's a verb. It's doing something that's outside the box and doing the right thing. And I couldn't agree more with what you're doing. I think he's going to be a great addition to your team. I think overall he has matured in multiple different ways from where he's been. I think it's great for your show. I think it's great for the WPIAL. I think it's great for him personally. And just, I think he's just, again, that football guy. I mean, you watched him play. I mean, one of the great things he was talking about in your interview was how Narduzzi would say to him, okay, you're going to play a little bit of Paris ball. Basically, you're going to go wherever the quarterback's eyes are. And I think that
play hot.
Oh, just that hot scene where just you're able to prove, hey, this kid's a special talent, and allow him to play the field the way he wants to. And that just goes back to also Narduzzi, Corey Sanders, Archie Collins. I've raved about them multiple different times. I think Ryan Manilak has taken it to a whole nother level with what he's doing with linebacker recruiting. But just those guys in general, I think that they develop talent better than anybody else within the 100-mile radius of where we are.
Yeah.
How they're able to develop talent, find that talent, take guys are undersized or maybe under-recruited and turn them into All-Americans. I mean, look at the numerous guys that you've seen come out of the Western Pennsylvania. Dane Jackson was one of those guys that ended up being a tremendous football player, now plays a starter in the National Football League. DeMar Hamlin, I mean, he was a 4-star recruit, but look how well he turned out. There's just multiple guys.
It's the guys like Damari Mathis. I mean, the newest one is Cal Lewis. Cal Lewis had a Pitt and Penn State offer. Penn State didn't love him because he wasn't tall enough. We had him at camp. We saw him flying around. I can remember the day Tim Salem, I was very upset when Narduzzi got rid of Tim Salem. You never fire your best recruiter. And Tim was far and above the best recruiter. And I remember Tim said, I don't understand why nobody likes this kid. He's coming to our camp. I gave him a scholarship offer, but he has to come and earn the scholarship. He comes to our camp. It was a 7-on-7. He could only come to a 7-on-7 camp, and we had a quick little workout with some players. Now, that is legal in the rules, because the 7-on-7 is technically a camp day. We brought in but it was for Cal Lewis, to see Cal Lewis, but we brought in 15, 20 more kids, whether it be within that 3-hour radius. And Cal just blew the doors off. We're like, yeah, we're taking this kid 100 times out of 100. But it was one of those things, he was just an inch too small. It's like, what are we talking about here? Is 5'11" and 6 foot really that much of a difference? Could you imagine that defense without Cal Lewis on it? He was going to go to
unanimous
All-American. That's the reality. He was going to Temple, and we took him, and it's been unbelievable ever since.
And you've talked about that as well. And I know to all the people in the comment section, we'll get to those comments and the super chats down below. Again, appreciate everybody tuning in. We've got between X and YouTube, we're over 500 people in the chat right now. Make sure you drop a super chat down below and we'll get to it. But Karlo, to your point, talk about how, and I think there's finally starting to become recognition. And for a long time, I talked about it, and people were multiple people saying that I was just overly positive on it. I was overhyping Pitt. I was overhyping the certain guys on the staff. But now there's national recognition for this Pitt staff that's actually, and even the previous staff with a lot of guys that were there, including Tim Salem, recruiting, but also developing. And then now there's national notoriety and attention that says, hey, you look at the draft scale and what the draft level looks like from going to Pitt to the NFL. Pitt is up there just like with anybody else. And you re-rank a lot of these classes. Pitt's in the top 10.
I always said
crazy.
This. It used to drive me nuts, JJ, because when I say on Twitter, and when you say on Twitter, we understand what we're saying. Sometimes the fans, and not Pitt fans, I'm talking other college football fans. We know which ones are the loudest, of course. Mainly the most moronic ones are always the loudest from Morgantown and Happy Valley.
Yeah.
But when I say Pitt is one of the best developing teams in the nation, they don't understand what I'm saying. We're not getting the 4- and 5-star guys. Why are our draft stats all with the teams that are getting 4- and 5-star guys? That doesn't let Pitt off the hook for not recruiting those 4- and 5-star guys. It's tough to land those 4- and 5-star guys. It's just the reality. But that doesn't say, hey, Pitt knows. No, we are developing the 3 stars in the mid-tier at a much higher clip than anybody else. I always said the sweet spot for Pitt, everybody gets obsessed with the stars. And let me tell you this, it's not the star rankings. If you look at top 24/7 Sports, I think 24/7 Sports is the best evaluating media site.
I agree.
And I don't really love media site evaluations, but in that regard, I think 247 is the best. Look at the guys ranked 1 to 1,000, okay? Because those are your power 4 type players. I think the sweet spot for Pitt, and that's what we really started to hit later in my tenure there, was the kids ranked from 300 to 700. If you go after those kids hard, you are going to start landing better and better crops of players, because the reality was, when I first got at Pitt, and once again, this isn't saying that I did this. No, this was, the entire recruiting staff, the entire Pitt staff. I'm not saying I did this, because I didn't. I'm just telling you what's going on.
Yeah.
Pitt was recruiting the 4- and 5-stars, not getting the 4- and 5-stars. Well, then guess what? Oh, shoot. All the kids ranked 300 to 700, the Minnesotas of the world, the Illinois, the Indianas, the Virginia Techs, the Marylands, they were all recruiting them for months. Pitt can't be months behind the 300, 700 ranked.
Yeah.
So what happens then? Well, your ass better be evaluating really well, because now you're in the 750 to 1,200 range of kids. You better pick a couple diamonds in the rough. And we did pick a couple diamonds in the rough. Haba Baldonado being one, Matt Gonsalves being one. Guys like that, you have to get them.
Savassier Dennis, a 2-star that comes out of nowhere.
Another one. Exactly, right in there. But if you find that nice sweet spot of 300 to 700 and you start recruiting them early, well, all of a sudden your recruiting starts ticking up more and more and more. And I think that Pat Narduzzi has done a great job in doing that, in identifying them early and getting into there. I can't stress this enough. My old boss, Graham Wilbert, he really has spearheaded this recruiting staff in finding those top players. I mean, Pitt offers these guys months before any other Power 4 school offers them, months before it. We're already ahead of the game. Now, all of a sudden, you look at the recruiting classes nowadays, holy smokes, we're in the 20s and 30s now. We're not in the 40s, 50s, and 60s anymore. So
exactly,
I think that is key, and I think that that's what having staff stability is so important. Pat Narduzzi being there for 10 years, Graham Wilbert being there for 7-8 years now, having that stability in the staff, you start to see these results, because every single year, hey, let's tinker this, let's tinker that. All of a sudden, after 7 years of tinkering, you see how Pitt is recruiting right now. They're recruiting the best they've had in the entire Narduzzi tenure, and he's on year 10. Normally, the first couple years are the big years for a head coach to be recruiting. So, just having that stability in identifying those guys early is key.
And I think when you hit a really good point there, just to where you guys really identified the talent between where you really needed to look and where you were landing it and how you were developing, which led to a reason why 2021 was an ACC title. If we don't have COVID, I think 2020 is possibly an ACC title. That defense was absolutely freakish.
That
I mean, Patrick Jones
was better than the 2021 team. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah.
No doubt in
and
my
I
mind.
think it's a totally different ballgame.
There was, one key thing Pat Narduzzi did in 2021. That 2020 team was super talented. And I hate saying this because I don't want to talk bad on any of the players, but all those players, and I think we had 7 or 8 guys drafted that year. I shouldn't say all those players, but most of those players were playing for themselves. How can I get my draft
Improve my stock?
Yes. That offseason, Pat Narduzzi, if you remember, it was kind of like this, some media picked it up, some didn't. He put team on the back of everybody's practice jerseys. And our saying started to be, we, not me. And the reason for that was, how can Pitt have more draft picks than any other ACC team, including Clemson and Miami that year, and only win 6 games? And it was those guys were being a little bit selfish is the point at the end of the day. And that's how you lose those close games. We had 2 1-point losses that year. That derailed that 2020 year. Then Kenny gets injured. But yeah, that we, not me, it kind of stuck. And when you have a guy who doesn't give one iota of an F about his draft stock, being Kenny Pickett, just spearheading it the entire way. Like, I can remember he didn't necessarily say this, but it was like, hey, nobody's going to talk about the NFL draft this year. We're winning a championship. We're getting 10 wins. I can remember that it really didn't start as an ACC championship. It was, we're taking the next step, winning 10 games was how that kind of started. And it just blossomed into, hey, we're going for a championship. But Kenny kind of spearheading that, saying, I don't care about my draft stock. I don't care about my stats. We're going out. We're balling out. And look what happened. I mean, he was a first-round pick, first quarterback taken in that draft. So sometimes if you take care of the little things, the big things end up taking care of themselves.
Yeah, and then we'll get to more of Kenny's stuff down and towards the end of the pod. But talk about that just for a second, what it truly means. And I think a lot of fans don't understand this. You just mentioned there why that 2020 team, which was more talented than 21, but 21 was clearly a better football team overall because they were in it for them, in it for the team. And I don't think that many people understood, because I heard a lot about this during the year, that Kenny was spearheading a lot of the direct conversations, as if they were guys starting to fall off the wagon, he was pulling them back in. And especially after that Western Michigan game, where it was a players-only meeting, I heard it was pretty direct, and he was very much like on people's asses to where, hey, we're not allowing this one game to derail our season. And you watch that team.
Oh, yeah. I always said that Western Michigan loss probably won us that championship, because that was, we knew that we were good. We went down to Tennessee, beat Tennessee in Knoxville.
Stadium.
Everybody was like, holy smokes, like, we got something cooking this year. And then we go and blow it to Western Michigan. Everybody, was like that Bob Junko saying, never get too high, never get too low. We go and blow it against Western Michigan, and Kenny rallied the troops. It was a players-only meeting. It was kind of like, hey, guys, wake up. Nobody gives a shit. We're not going to be the same old Pitt where, we have a couple big wins every single year and then a couple bad losses. This is it. And, that was the guiding. If you don't have a captain like that, you will never win a championship. And that's the question I have for this year's Pitt team. Will Eli Holstein step up and be a guy like Kenny Pickett?
Yeah, and I think that I've had questions about that. I think, a guy, he was a redshirt freshman last year. You look at him and say, hey, okay, you don't want him to come in and to be the leader right away. He's a young guy. There's got to be other guys. I thought Konate Mumfield stepped up. I thought he did a good job. And you had other guys on the defensive side of the football. I think more the offensive line will be, Ryan Baer will step up this year. He's been there long enough, and I think he's a good player. But when you look at the teams, and I get this a lot, and I get fans that say this all the time, Pitt does a great job of developing talent, finding that talent, and then going off to the NFL. The thing that's not equating, and I think you hit on a little bit there, is just the leadership-wise, or player-wise, the captain-wise, is why that's not translating into more wins. Okay, and you look at the Narduzzi tenure, he's had 2 great years. I mean, he brings in, after the Mark Whipple, debacle, how all that went out and about, and we've certainly heard enough about that, from top to bottom. But then he brings in Frank Cignetti. They start, they go 4-4. It looks ugly, but they finish out the last 5 games of that year, beats a ranked UCLA, goes 9-4, finishes in the top 25 back-to-back years. They're 20-9 in 2 straight years. The question I think people want to ask a lot of, and I don't want to get on too much of the staff, but at the same time, though, it's got to be a cohesiveness of why it's not there. But it's just the reason why they're not winning more. And I think that there's a little bit of give and take. A lot of it we talked about with the players, more of the draft stock, for instance, like when Jalen Twyman dropped out and didn't play that 2020 season. I thought that was a massive mistake. Paris Ford pretty much opting out and not playing the rest of the season, not coming back. The pro day wasn't good. That was a bad decision. You're looking at a lot of that kind of stuff. And then 2021 comes around. And then those guys from top to bottom, you look at, the defense side of the football, Eric Hallett was a great leader. You had Damar Hamlin. Well, not Damar Hamlin back there. You had Brandon Hill back
Dennis,
there. Servassier Dennis, Habakkuk Baldonado. Numerous guys on that team. You looked across the board. It was an incredible amount of talent. I thought Izzy Abanikano was a leader, Kenny Pickett. But it's just for Pitt to be more consistent. Do you think it's more like the players got to show more leadership to where, hey, this isn't the same old stuff anymore. Here's how 2021 worked. Here's how 2022 worked. Is it more the players, more the coaches, or a little bit of both, do you think?
I think it needs to be a little bit of both there. And, Frank Zanetti, and I love Frank, he is one of those guys. He is the best guy to know in the game of football because he will do whatever for the young guys to get a job. I could call up Frank right now. I could FaceTime. He would answer and join in right now. He's that type of dude. But there were some things that, didn't really jive with Narduzzi. And the same thing with Whipple. Narduzzi, I'm not going to, people have a problem sometimes taking direct orders. Yeah. If you're in college football, you have to understand you have one boss, and that is the head coach. And I think some guys have a problem with that, especially OCs that are coming in are kind of told, hey, I'm a defensive guy. I'm not messing with the offense. I need you to be the head coach of the offense. But when Narduzzi says something, you have to do it. And I think Frank and Whipple, especially Whipple, didn't really love that at times. And everybody has to be on board. And if you're not, you'll drop some games. And it's not fun to think about. But I thought that 2022 team ended 9-4 or whatever it may have been.
Yeah, 9-4.
Talk about some disappointing losses. That team was just as talented as that 21 team. Should have at least made the ACC championship. Probably would have beat Clemson if we were in it, but definitely should have made the ACC. But we dropped too many games early, and it was just mind-numbingly stupid mistakes, and sometimes that's what it is.
Yeah, and I think when you look at especially that 9-4 season, it was great how they ended the season. But to your point, you look back at those 2 years, and I heard a lot of debacle between like to your point, direct orders. That's like anywhere else in the country. If Nick Saban tells you to do something, you're damn well going to do it. If Kirby Smart tells you to do something, it could be the same thing as Brett Bielema over Illinois. He tells you to do something, you're damn well going to do it. Same thing with Luke Fickell, any of these guys. And to your point, sometimes the ego gets in the way of that type of thing, and it gets in the way of it, and it halts the team. And that's why I think just going forward, I think that, Pitt, again, they've got questions going into the season, but I think that they have a lot of talent from what people are starting to finally realize. You bring back a Des Reed, you got Jules Goff back there. Hopefully Derek Davis gets 100% healthy. Personally, I'd like to have a bigger back, someone who could rotate in there. Daniel Carter was starting to get a lot of looks last year. I felt so horrible when he got hurt. The ultimate team player. The same thing with Nick Patty when he was going through his stuff. We talked about the 2022 season where if Keaton Slovis doesn't get hurt, I think they go all the way. I just think that the concussion issue, that there was something else going on there to where he just wasn't back to normal. He was being very hesitant.
The problem with Keaton was the kid lacked confidence, and you needed to instill confidence in him. And early in the year, he had it. And at the later part of the year, he kind of had it. But there were some missteps with Keaton. I thought Keaton was as talented as Kenny Pickett. I know people think that's crazy. I think Keaton threw a little bit better ball than Kenny. Kenny had more leadership abilities and more escapability within the pocket. But you want to talk about just being able to deliver the football in a window. Both were great, but Keaton Slovis made some throws in practice, and you're like, holy smokes. But Keaton liked the game, everything in front of him. Okay. Yeah. So he liked getting in that shotgun and seeing the field. He didn't like turning his back and doing the play action and stuff. Well, guess what? That's all Frank Signetti did.
That's what his business.
It just didn't gel. And if you remember, we took Keaton before we hired Frank Signetti. So he kind of
Yeah,
came in blind. So things just didn't line up. That marriage wasn't necessarily great, but I wish Keaton the best. I like Keaton a lot. I thought he was a really, really good quarterback. I thought Pitt fans gave him kind of an undeserved, a lot of flack, undeservedly so. That Louisville game, he had a bad Louisville game. There's no doubt
yeah,
about that. But there was some plays that Keaton made throughout the year, and you're like, holy smokes. I mean, think about that West Virginia game in 22, that drive he led. He made
yeah.
some big time throws that I don't know other quarterbacks in Pitt history could make there.
Multiple
And
tutties, 300 yards
yeah,
passing. I mean, the
had a
kid
couple
did it.
big runs as well. But once again, you lined him up in that 2-minute offense. You let him see the field. Oh man, he'll slice you and dice you all day. Jordan leaving kind of hurt everything.
Yeah,
But yeah, that was the year, that 22 year. I kind of look at it as 2020. It's like almost one that got away. But I think that there's a lot of similarities between that 2022 year and the season coming up, this 2025
hmm
team. I think
I
this
agree.
25 team could surprise some people, but once again, Keaton didn't have those leadership abilities Kenny Pickett had.
Yeah.
If he doesn't have to be Kenny Pickett, but he's got to be significantly better than Keaton Slovis. And if he is, I've made a bold prediction on my podcast. I think Pitt's going to be playing in the ACC championship game. I don't know if they win, but I think they'll be playing there.
And those are going to be my questions down the road here, and we'll get to that. And because I got my prediction was in the same realm. I think they really do have the talent. I think they brought in guys that are pretty damn good. I like the additions. They brought in the offensive line, guys that actually have experience this time. The same thing, the defensive line. Jaden Moore comes in from Oregon. From
Mm-hmm.
everything I've been hearing, I mean, he kind of has really done. He was a pass rush specialist, but a guy that was just uber talented to where he was getting to the quarterback. But he's taken really good coaching with Tim Dowse. So, I mean, that's going to be something good to watch. But even, we talk about the 2022 season, the game that I thought that was truly Keaton Slovis and the game that changed everything was Tennessee. I thought he
Agreed.
stood in the pocket. He was getting murdered in the pocket. I mean, he was still delivering passes. You Gavin Bartholomew make like freakish plays out in the open. I mean, jumping over defenders. I mean, that team was just uber talented that was there, but just like, it's crazy that we went from, the pass happy offense of where we were. And if you kind of run that same offense, you're more than likely going to have success. And I understand that Pat wanted to be able to run the football more with Izzy, but some of just the decision making with Pat just kind of just confuses me because it's just, you recruited a way to make sure you're happy within the pass game and being able to run the football. It's almost like a good marriage there.
Yeah.
But then just to the point where you have a quarterback that's not happy, that does not like to be able to turn his back, can't see the field. You'd would hope to make those adjustments. But at the end of the day, Frank was 10 times better than when Sean Watson ever was. I mean, that
Oh
that
boy,
old
that was night and day. Oh yeah.
I mean, that was absolutely horrific to watch. I mean, on numerous levels, we should have beaten Notre Dame at Notre Dame when Sean Watson was there. I mean, the defense played lights out, but we couldn't score a touchdown, ended up losing that game. But regardless, I mean, you look at overall throughout the years, it's just some of those personnel decisions that Pat makes. I would hope to see, going forward, we have the collective group now. They're back all again.
Mm-hmm.
I think it works in that favor where you finally have it.
Yeah, I think the hiring of Cade Bell was a significant step for Narduzzi because at the end of the day, he wanted to turn the ACC, and I think he's done a very good job of doing this where, we've made 2 championship games in his tenure. He wanted to turn the ACC into kind of like that Big Ten, hey, run the rock, control the game, and play unbelievable defense, and that's what he wanted to do. That was great in the Big Ten 15 years ago.
Yeah.
That's the question. So I think hiring Cade, that's almost him kind of admitting like, yeah, we love Frank, but that probably wasn't the hire that we needed. And honestly, I don't want to speak bad about Frank because he's a great dude, but that 23 year when he brought in Phil Dracovic, I can remember everybody
Horrible.
kind of being like, we can get better. But Frank is the type of guy where if he has a relationship, he will go to bat for you. And him and Phil were very close.
Yep.
So he was like, no, I want my guy here. And the marriage just didn't work, unfortunately. And it's like that thing with Paris Fort. Not everything is a fairy tale ending. Everybody on the planet wanted Phil Dracovic to be an All-American quarterback and lead Pitt to another championship. Sometimes reality just isn't that way.
Yeah. And to numerous Pitt fans, I've heard it back and forth. And I've had this battle back and forth with myself to where I've talked about it before. I love WPIAL guys, and we're going to go into some of the WPIAL recruits that have been committed to Pitt now this class. But the reality is, too, I'm starting to be turned off of the transfer portal and bringing guys back, because now it's almost like we're encouraging guys to hit the portal in certain areas to where, hey, go to this other school. You can go to a school for 2 years, then come back, because we've seen the comments, which I think were very much off base. I mean, we saw, Michael Kadich up in Indiana talk about how, he wasn't recruited hard enough by Pitt, which I thought was an absolute lie.
Well,
I thought he was recruited.
The problem with that one is, he saw how his teammate Andrew Kristofic was recruited, and he thought he was that. The reality is he wasn't that. Andrew Kristofic was a high 4-star recruit, top 100 player. Guess what? We're going to offer him early, and guess what? We're going to go balls to the wall for him for 2 years. He wasn't that guy. He wants to take shots at Pitt. That's fine. Take your shots. Maybe we should have seen it a little bit earlier. But to say like we were so late in the game, everybody was late in the game. He didn't get offers till his spring going into his senior year.
Yeah.
So it's not like we misevaluated him. We had him at camp multiple times. Borbley went out to go see him in spring, came back and said, you know what? I wouldn't hate having Kadich here. So we offered him, and then he wants to trash Pitt. That's just normal Western PA guys. They all want their asses kissed for no reason. And at the end of the day, these kids are looking for any reason to get out of Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. So, they're going to say, oh, Pitt didn't show me enough love early. Get out of here. Yeah, Indiana did. Was Indiana recruiting you for 2 years? Come on. And if he doesn't have that, if they don't bring in Cignetti and they don't have that fairy tale season during his COVID year, his 6th-year COVID year, he would have been a perennial loser as well. They had one decent year in 2020, and then he makes the playoffs last year. But for his college football career, it's not like Indiana was blowing Pitt out the water. No way. He missed the ACC.
Tom Allen got fired. Allen lost his job.
Exactly.
I mean, he literally got fired because they were literally, if you look at the history of Indiana football, it's one of the worst in the actual college football. They haven't had a successful program. A lot like, for instance, if you look at, I hate to say it to the Big Ten, but you look at Rutgers. I mean, that addition, they're almost like, with the world of conference realignment, they're just blessed to be in the Big Ten because they're never going to achieve anything.
They're in there to get their teeth kicked in every single week. But guess what? Collect your check and act like you're all high and mighty. I would not want to be in Rutgers' position. I mean, you get your teeth kicked in 8 times a year. It sounds terrible. You want a place where you're playing winning football. Rutgers, that was a bad move.
I mean, just money-wise, I get it, but they're never going to achieve anything. And the results have proven that, to where I think the New York Times had an article out that said it was one of the worst conference realignment moves ever in college football because of their losses.
And the money thing absolutely drives me nuts, JJ. You're not in college football to make as much money for a university. You're there to win championships. Do you want to win? Yes or no? Like Texas A&M moving to the SEC, that made no sense. They haven't done anything since they got into the SEC. They really didn't do much in the Big 12 either. But Oklahoma's the same way. Do you think Oklahoma's going to win the SEC in the next 10 years legitimately? Does anybody on the planet, other than people down in Oklahoma, in Norman, do they think that Oklahoma's going to win that SEC? There's no chance. They'll never sniff the playoffs again. It's stupid of them.
They were running the Big 12. They owned the Big 12 for over a decade. Texas, you look at Texas, for instance, I mean, multiple 5 and 7 seasons. They never did anything until the latter years, to where Sarkisian comes in. He still had a 5 and 7 season. Mm-hmm. They at least they go to the SEC. They're producing because of the money that's there. I don't think Oklahoma has enough money like a Texas does. And even Texas A&M, who has the most money of anybody, just can't get it together. And I think that, I love Mike Elko. Yeah. I love Mike Elko. I think he's a tremendous football coach. But when you have, and I tried telling people this too, when we hired Alan Green, people were like, oh, all the Auburn shit. I mean, what they have to understand is at those places, the donors control a lot of what goes on. And it's a money-driven organization, to where if Bobby donates $2 million, Bobby's going to get whatever the hell he wants. So these decisions, and let's all be honest too, I told people when he was hired, when Brian Harsin was hired, he was one of the best coaches that were out there coming out of Boise State.
Everybody wanted
anybody,
him.
Anybody would have wanted him. I mean, he won how many games? So it's not like it was a bad hire. But I think you look at Auburn and you look at the history of Auburn, ever since Malzahn left there, and even towards the latter years after Cam Newton, what have they done? I mean, they're almost getting ready to fire Hugh Freeze out of there. A lot of that stuff, I think people just don't understand the background noise of what maybe me and you can, but it's just, there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes. In
Agreed.
transitioning into behind the scenes, there's 3 guys that Pitt picked up out of the WPIAL, and it was offensive lineman and defensive lineman central. And I looked at these kids and I looked at their tape, and one, I was honestly impressed. The rest in layman, I've heard numerous people reach out to me personally and say, JJ, this kid's a freak athletically, but the strength wise, he's there. But first, I want you to talk about John Coran III. Okay, you look at his offer sheet. People might say, well, he doesn't have a lot of offers that are currently there, but you tweeted out that he performed pretty well in the Pitt camp, which I had heard as well. And all of a sudden, now he's starting to get more Power 4 interest, which seems to be an ongoing theme every single year. Once Pitt offers somebody, all the other schools come on board. But I just want to get your thoughts first on John Coran III. What are your thoughts on him committing to Pitt out of Pine Richland? And do you think just where he's ranked now, do you think he gets more offers? What does that currently look like?
No, I don't think he's going to get more offers. I think everybody kind of understands, like, he's a Pitt kid, because the guys that would offer him would be like a Maryland, a Rutgers, and Indiana, and none of them will have enough juice to flip him. So, like, the only guys that will have the juice to flip somebody like him would be, like, in Ohio State. I hate to say, probably maybe even a Penn State, and those teams are just recruiting too well to take an. I mean, he's an interior guy. He's not super long, which is the problem. That's why a lot of Power 4 schools didn't really pull the trigger on him. But if you go to a Pitt camp and you come away with a scholarship, that tells me he is a dude. Now, the thing that I really loved about this recruitment here, JJ, and this is very key here, and I don't think many people are talking about it. He got an offer and pretty much committed on the spot. It was like within 48 hours he committed. So that's a big deal, because that's telling me he didn't shop that Pitt offer around, because that's what's going on in Western Pennsylvania. If you get a Pitt offer, these kids are shopping the offer around to other Power 4s. Like, hey, Pitt thinks I'm good enough. What about you? All of a sudden, those are the types of kids that normally end up in the transfer portal anyway. But I think that's a big deal. He got the Pitt offer. He didn't go to Penn State and say, hey, I got a Pitt offer. Check me out. No. He said, this is what I want. I want to be at Pitt, and he committed. So that, I think, is a big deal, especially at a school like Pine Richland, because historically, Pitt hasn't done well in Pine Richland.
Yeah.
So I think that is something that not a lot of people are talking about. Hey, Pitt was a destination school for a kid from Pine Richland. Normally, we don't really do too well at Pine. So I think that kind of shows the tides are turning a little bit there.
Yeah, and that was good to see, too. Again, winning at Pine Richland was great. An interior offensive lineman who I think that when you watch his tape, I think, again, to your point, you talk about the length is what people had more concerns about. But his physicality, he loves to get violent. I mean,
he's a tough, gritty Pittsburgh kid. You take that kid 100 times out of 100 if you're Pitt. It's not going to be a miss. At the very least, your football team is going to be tougher for taking a kid like him. If you bring the toughness up in a team, it's always going to be a good take. I don't care if he's a perennial scout teamer. At least he's giving his all every practice and will be a good locker room guy and a guy that makes the team tougher, meaner, and kind of goal-oriented.
Exactly. And it kind of rolls over into the defensive side of the football now. You get Lincoln Hoke, the son of Chris Hoke, who played for the Pittsburgh Steelers for numerous years, a guy who's a legend with the Steelers. He had offers. I mean, West Virginia was pushing hard. And from anybody that I talked to, West Virginia wanted this kid pretty badly. Locks down. Pitt's able to lock him down. Talk about that and anything you've heard. I think he's going to actually be a pretty damn good football player for us.
He's actually my second favorite recruit in Western Pennsylvania this year. I'll get to my first favorite a little bit later. But Lincoln Hoke, he's going into his senior year. It's going to be 3 years of production. This is a kid that won the 6A Defensive Player of the Year award as a sophomore. Just wreaks havoc. If he's 2 inches taller, he's a high 4-star recruit. Probably not a 5-star, but definitely a high 4-star recruit. People will say he's sawed off. Sawed off means short. Well, guess what? Kalijah Cansey was short. David Green was short. You name them.
Jalen Twyman was short.
Jalen Twyman was short. The Pat Narduzzi defense doesn't care about the interior length. When you get to the outside edges, that's where length becomes an issue, because at the end of the day, to be a defensive end in the Pat Narduzzi defense, you have to have leverage on the outside, and being long helps that. But interior-wise, this kid is a slam dunk. Yeah, they held off West Virginia. JJ, I'm surprised a lot more teams didn't offer him. And I don't think he would have been like an Ohio State kid, one of those. But I'm surprised a team like Penn State didn't offer him. But the reason why Penn State didn't offer him, Penn State recruits players that will get drafted. They're looking for measurables. They're looking for camp performances.
Yeah.
And guess what? It works for them. They just made the damn semifinal of the college football playoffs. Pitt is worried about production and, tough, gritty kids. Penn State, they're looking at measurables, and, it works for both. Penn State certainly puts a lot of guys in the NFL. And trust me, if I could switch recruiting staff or recruiting rankings with Penn State every year, I would, if I could switch those classes, because they bring in some absolute dogs. But this is a guy that they wouldn't look at because of his height. Well, good.
Yeah.
Better news for Pitt, because this kid's a baller, but they beat Rich Rod for him, and they wanted him bad.
Yeah, and I heard that, and I think you look at Pitt's class overall, sitting at 23 right now. We've really taken a lot of guys from West Virginia where they were looking at a number of different guys across the board, and one of those guys, again, Reston Lehman, again, a defensive end. You talk about length at 6'4". I mean, he had offers from all over God's green earth. What are your thoughts on him?
I like Reston a lot. What's crazy is I can remember evaluating his freshman tape and thinking, yeah, this is a Power 4 football player. I think Pitt got a little lucky with him. Penn State would have taken this kid. So you beat Penn State in recruiting. That's a big deal. But
Yep.
I don't necessarily know if Penn State was pressing him. Penn State had a couple defensive ends a little bit higher on the board. They certainly would have taken him, but I don't know if they were necessarily recruiting him like they recruit the 5 and 4 stars. And he is a 4-star recruit, but I think that they had a couple on the board a little bit higher. But guess what? Too bad. Pitt will take him. In Penn State, they're getting shellacked by Notre Dame in recruiting right now. So maybe
I know,
maybe,
I saw.
Maybe
I
they
saw.
should have taken him. But that's what you deal with when you're dealing with a team. And, I hate to give Penn State so much props, but they're a top 5 program in college football right now. So they're kind of getting whoever they want. The fact that they wanted Reston Lehman and he said, no, I'm going to go to Pitt, that's a big deal to me. So he's probably my favorite guy in the class. I do wish, though, JJ, that they would have gotten Jay Timmons from Pine Richland. That is
Me and
one
you both.
that
I know.
I don't understand it. It's like one of those kids that just wants to get away from Pittsburgh. But, man, he's my favorite player in the WPIAL this year, and I thought Pitt was in a great position to get him, and it's just one of those deals where he doesn't want to stay in Pittsburgh. His entire life he's seen Steeler fans. He's seen all those fans. Just wants to get out. Tough pill to swallow. But, yeah, we got 3. Happy with the 3 that we got, but, man, would I have loved that 4th.
And to be honest with you, I had him, as much a favorite for Pitt for a long time. I think that's kind of where it was just really starting to trend. And then Indiana gets involved. And to your point, he just wanted to leave Pittsburgh, which, hey, I get it. I think he would have
like
thrived.
MJ Devonshire with Kentucky. It's not something that Indiana did. It was just like they were looking for a different program outside anywhere but Pitt. That's kind of what they were looking at. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if maybe he goes there and transfers back in a couple years like MJ. But, yeah, it sucks to see, but sometimes that's what kids want to do. I mean, I didn't leave Pittsburgh for my schooling, but I had a lot of friends that did. Some kids just want to leave Pittsburgh,
Yeah. And I think that's, hey, that'll be a conversation again down the road. And do we allow certain guys to come back? And that all goes there. And then the other guy that I really wanted in this class, because obviously I wanted Reston Lehman. That was one of, my first guy. I thought just from who was on the board, I really liked him. I love Jay Timmons, and I think he would be incredible in this defensive scheme, especially corner. I mean, he was built for it. I think he's an NFL prospect. But another guy that we missed, and he's at the end of the day, he's a lifelong Duke guy. He's been a Duke fan since he was a kid. Is Pittsburgh Central Catholics, Colson Gatton. His dad's a Penn State, former Penn State football player. Great family, great people. I would have loved to seen that kid play linebacker at Pitt. I think with Ryan Manilak's coaching and development, he would have been damn good at Pitt, and I understand, Manny Diaz was certainly on him, starting back, dating back to Penn State. That's when Manny Diaz really has built that relationship and goes down to Duke and keeps it going. But I'd have loved to see him get a kid out of there. And you look across the WPIAL right now, I understand where Pitt fans talk about guys that we missed. Like, for instance, I was to find some way to get Tyke Hayes. I thought Tyke Hayes would have been starting as a freshman. That's how good I thought that kid was. He's up at Penn State now. You see some of the guys that we've missed down the road. Do you think it's that big of an issue? Or, when you look across the board from Pitt, Penn State, and WVU, Pitt has the most WPIAL players on its roster. Do you think that Pitt's still doing better than what people think? Do you think it's a little bit over the wagon a little bit in terms of, well, Pitt's missing this guy or they're missing this guy, and it's like, well, Penn State didn't offer that guy, WVU didn't offer that guy, so why do we need to do our due diligence to offer that out or offer recruits friends to have them come to Pitt if they want to come to Pitt? Do you think it's as bad as it is, or do you think, hey, Pitt's actually doing a pretty good job based upon what they have so far?
As a WPIAL guy, I'm never gonna rest until Pitt builds that imaginary fence around the WPIAL.
Yeah.
But just to kind of put it in perspective, okay, Pittsburgh Central Catholic defensive end Ashton Blatt, Penn State wanted that kid. Yeah, he went to UNC. Okay.
Yeah.
How about this one? And this is one of my favorite guys in WPIAL. I thought Pitt should have offered him. Brock Heisler out of Hempfield.
Yeah.
He went to Harvard.
Yeah.
Harvard beat West Virginia for that kid. West Virginia was a high priority for them. So, everything is about perspective. Sure, do I want Pitt to get every single WPIAL kid? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, nobody in Penn State is obviously doing very well inside of Western Pennsylvania, but they're not landing 100% either. Ashton Blatt gets away. Reston Lehman gets away. He stays at Pitt. So it's not like, I think that they kind of do have a stranglehold on Western Pennsylvania, but it's not like, oh, Penn State's out recruiting Pitt like you can't believe. Not really. West Virginia, they have a really nice player committed in the next year's class, Armin Hill. But you just lost to an FCS team. After he officially visited West Virginia, he decided to go to Harvard. Okay, so let's not get it twisted here. Pitt is doing fine in the WPIAL. Could it be better? Absolutely. But everybody's missing. It's a crapshoot with kids sometimes. That's why, you're always told never fall in love with a recruit because they will break your heart one way or the other, and you're never going to get everybody.
And I agree. And I think when you look at a bunch of those guys across the board, I think they've done better than what people think. I think that the hysteria is just over the top. At the end of the day, I love the WPIAL, but the WPIAL is not what it was 10, 15 years ago when you had freaks of nature. Dave Wantz that was recently on the Pitt campus and talked to the Pitt football team. The way that he recruited guys like Doran Dickerson, Jason Pinkston, you had Lumpy, you had Chris Jacobson, Miles Carriage, and you had all those freaks of nature.
When Wani was coming out, the WPIAL had 30 to 40 Power 4 guys every single year. Right now, this is our best year in 10 years, JJ, and we have 12. So it's not like the WPIAL's. If we had 30 to 40 and Pat Narduzzi landed 10 or 11. Yeah, that's a pretty good haul. That's not reality anymore. It just isn't that. It's just not. Some years they have 4 or 5 kids. Pitt's not going to get 10, 11 guys from the WPIAL anymore. It's just not in the cards just because there's not enough recruits in the WPIAL to do it. You need 30 Power 4 kids in the WPIAL to do it. This is the best year in 10 years. There's 12, so it is what it is in that regard.
And I think, to your point, I agree. And I think that they're doing a lot better. They're taking the guys they can get, but the numbers are less. We've looked at for instance, I was looking at the numbers overall in Pennsylvania with football players. The numbers have dropped dramatically from what it was just 10 years ago. So that obviously hurts the chances of getting more Power 4 guys. But to your point about West Virginia, I've talked to numerous people about it. I know some people down there. There is some concern because again, I don't think Rich Rod's going to pan out there. I think he's going to bring back a lot of toughness compared to what was there previously. And they had 4 losing seasons in the last 6 years, which has been absolutely horrible. It's been one of the worst runs in West Virginia history. But you look at overall the recruiting classes. I mean, they're sitting in the 40s, and then like the high 40s, low 50s. They're going to drop even more when people start adding more recruits. I sometimes I just don't know where they're headed at right now or what that's going to look like. But losing to Harvard's never a good thing. And if a kid rather go to Harvard than West Virginia, that's kind of a problem.
They're going to struggle this year, JJ. I mean, they needed to hit that spring portal recruiting period super hard. Those kids didn't hop in the portal in the spring. And the reason for that is the SEC. If you go into the portal from the SEC, you can't transfer to another SEC team.
Yeah.
So all the SEC kids, they don't want to leave the SEC. So they were all locked in. So it was slim pickings in that spring portal period, and West Virginia had to take legitimately 15 guys from that spring portal period. There's going to be some holes in that roster. I wish that you had them later in the year, like in November, because when a roster has holes, injuries are going to happen.
Yeah.
But no, I feel good about Pitt versus WVU.
So do I, because you look at overall too. I think overall they have 70 new players, trying to get all those guys to figure out the offensive scheme. That defensively, Zach Alley comes in from Oklahoma with, Brent Venables, but to install that type of a defense where he's very aggressive, almost like a Narduzzi in terms of blitz packages. I mean,
it take a year or two. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna take a little bit of time.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
But
agreed.
looking through here, obviously we'll get a couple more questions here, and obviously I don't want to take up too much of your time. But overall, here you talked about the record. You think Pitt's going to potentially go to the AC title game. I agree with that. Tell me about why you think that.
Yeah, the schedule isn't great, but I
Yeah.
mean, it's never going to be a gauntlet because you have Syracuse and Boston College every single year. So, who's the third team on our schedule? It's Syracuse, Boston College,
And
and
not Virginia Tech. Who is that?
I wish it was Virginia Tech.
I know.
It
Always love
it
beating
might
them.
be Miami,
Yes,
but
Miami. Yes.
it's not a gauntlet of a schedule. I think if I'm circling the calendar, it's that September 27th against Louisville there, man.
Yeah.
If they can get past Louisville, and I think Braum is maybe the best coach in the ACC other than Dabo. They get by Louisville, I'm saying book your tickets to Charlotte. But I think that they're going to third team is Louisville, says Jimmy. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. If they can get by that Louisville game, I feel really good because you got Boston College. I think that they're going to smoke Boston College this year. Pat Narduzzi doesn't like losing twice in a row to a team that he should beat. I think that they're going to beat BC. Florida State will be a nice little revenge game. Syracuse, Fran Brown, I'll tell you this.
He's a good football coach.
This is the year to get to the ACC title game because I've had other college coaches tell me, they go to these different camps up at Syracuse, like all the group of fives and FCS guys. They said, when I tell you that Syracuse camp has some dudes at it and the kids working the camp, the freshmen, he said those freshmen and the transfers are coming in are unlike anything that Syracuse has ever seen before. I think Syracuse is a year or two away, but Fran Brown is going to be a serious problem. So you better get him this year. But I like Pitt to go to the championship. I just hope that they have enough horses to win it. And I'll tell you the key factor here, JJ, is that backup running back position.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, Desmond Reed is electrifying. He's 5'5", $160 maybe. That's reality. Okay, I like living in reality. You're not giving him 20 touches a game, JJ. He can't do it in a power four.
Yep.
You can't do it.
His body can't take it. Yeah.
Yeah, you hope Derek Davis comes back healthier and stronger. I'm not entirely sure. Coming back from a big injury like that, not easy to do. I wish they would have got one more running back in the portal. But yeah, I think 9-3 this year, JJ. I really do. And I think we get Notre Dame. I think it's past due time. Pat Narduzzi finally gets Notre Dame.
And it's funny you said that because I have 9-3 right now as well after spring camp, and I was between 8-4 and 9-3. And you look at really the schedule you go through there. You have the Louisville, Syracuse, Florida State. Those last 3 games, they have a bye week, and then they go to face Notre Dame, then Georgia Tech, then Miami. Those last 3 games, I think Georgia Tech is a team that Pitt should beat, but they're continually getting better and better. They're finding ways to win. They're more of that old school type of way where they're really looking to run the rock is what they're trying to do with Haynes King is their quarterback there. They should have beaten.
I like that Haynes, man. He's good.
Yeah. They should have beaten Georgia last year if it wasn't for a lot of the referees and those calls. I mean, I thought that game, you watched that, they should have won that football game. Yep. But I think overall, when you look at their schedule, I agree. You'll have the backyard brawl. They should take care of business there this year. If it's not, God help the coaching staff. I'm just letting them know right now. I mean, if you lose to the West Virginia team that literally has 75 new players, that there's going to be some problems.
Yeah.
But you look across the board there, I think 9-3, and I think they have a really good shot too to get there and obviously beat Notre Dame down the stretch, depending upon what they look like. Again, I think Marcus Freeman's a damn good football coach, and I think
did they bring in a quarterback this year, Notre Dame?
I don't know if they brought in a guy. I think they still have the kid there that was
that his still.
No, not the Leonard went to the NFL. It's the former head coach at Michigan back in the day. His son is now there.
Oh, okay, yeah.
What's his? I can't remember his last name. Oh yeah, there we go. CJ Carr. Thank you, CJ Carr.
So CJ Carr is okay. Wow. Normally Notre Dame does the 1-year rental on the quarterback.
Yeah, they love contacting Kenny. They love contacting all these guys and trying to get them to go in the portal. They have CJ Carr. The backup right now seems to be Kenny Minchie. He has not turned out to be the guy they thought he would be.
Oh,
he committed from Pitt.
Hey, I know Pitt fans loved him. I didn't see it from the get-go. That kid is not explosive enough, and his arm talent wasn't good enough. to not be explosive. Like some guys, they don't have that extra step. He didn't, but you better have an arm, and he didn't. I couldn't believe. I was doing backflips when when he decommitted. I said, "Good, we can go get somebody else." But yeah, Kenny Minchie, he's going to get that Notre Dame degree and then get out of there, but he will not be their guy.
Yeah. They'll be going back to the portal again after this year if it doesn't work out. And I think there's a lot of hope into CJ Carr, but there's certainly a lot of questions there. And we talk about the quarterback position. Got to hit this topic here today. Obviously, me and you, it is a debacle to no end. The Pittsburgh media does not let it go. That's kind of where I just draw the line with a lot of personal attacks to this kid. But Kenny Pickett, it's for me right now, I have him as the projected star of the Cleveland Browns. And the absolute attacks that this kid gets is, and I get it. He went to Pitt. He goes to the Steelers. Penn State fans don't like him because of that. West Virginia fans don't like him. But the people that get me is, there's a lot of things that went on with the Steelers that were very dysfunctional. For instance, Matt Canada should never been coaching in the National Football League. The amount of scouts that came and told me that it was an absolute joke. There was no game planning. Nothing was done. The offensive line was an absolute joke. Your best wide receiver was a true rookie, and George Pickens, who just got traded. Deontay Johnson has been a journeyman since he's back with Cleveland. If he even stays on the roster there with his attitude adjustments and lack of work ethic, there's just things across the board with the Steelers that just didn't work. Yeah. And I think that, Kenny had a very good point to want to leave the Steelers and just go to look for another opportunity because the Steelers just really are not being able to show they can develop a quarterback. That's why they're putting all their hitches on their wagon with a 41-year-old, 42-year-old quarterback, which seems to be a pretty much of a stretch. But do you think Kenny has an opportunity to start with the Cleveland Browns, or what is your thoughts with that?
Yeah, and once again, this goes back to, I will gladly admit that I've been wrong for 5 years if Kenny Pickett is not the starter for the Cleveland Browns. I know the kid. I know the talent. I know the competitive nature. What happened in Pittsburgh, I don't understand it. Like sometimes the media, and they did the same thing with James Conner, if you remember, JJ.
Yeah.
People hated James Conner. And it almost goes back to, Pitt doesn't have a sports journalism school. So all the media members in the Pittsburgh region are Penn State guys. Yeah. And it's not totally that, but you can't tell me those media members love digging at Kenny Pickett, and it got them clicks. You're going to keep, if you do something, you get the clicks. If I do something on WPIAL Insider, hey, I just posted these top five teams. Holy smokes. Look at all the likes and clicks I got. I'm going to do that again next week. It got beyond comical with this kid. Mind you, JJ, he was only at Pittsburgh for 2 years. It was his rookie year in his first real year in the NFL. He had the worst offensive coordinator
in the history of the NFL.
Did you literally in the history of the NFL ranked statistically? Did you know
ESPN
the second
ranked
highest
the worst?
Paid? Yeah. Did you know the second highest paid player on the Steelers offense? His second year was Allen Robinson, who was wide receiver 4. Did you know that? If you're not going to give this kid pieces, I'm not saying he's Josh Allen. I'm not saying he's Patrick Mahomes. But if you give the kid pieces, he will make it work. He has to have pieces, though. He had nothing. He had everybody on their rookie deals. I think if they had Kenny Pickett right now, that future's looking a whole lot more promising because I bet you he balls out this year.
Yeah.
A part of me wants to go on like a DraftKings or FanDuel or something. I don't even know if they offer this. If Kenny Pickett wins Comeback Player of the Year, because legitimately, I know the talent. I know his competitive nature. Joe Flacco's not beating this kid out. And if Flacco does beat the kid out, I will gladly admit, hand up, I was wrong. I don't see it, though. I really don't.
I don't see it either. And from people that I talk to who are actually close to the organization have already said that he is going to be the guy going forward. Unless something catastrophically happens,
right?
I just don't see it. And I think that what gets me is it's like, okay, if you don't like the guy because he didn't play well for whatever reason, that's fine. There's certainly things that Kenny could have done better. But the supporting cast and the players that were around him were not there. I mean, the entire offensive line is pretty much different. I mean, for crying out loud, I mean, how many times did we see free defenders? I mean, Ian Cole was absolutely horrible at center.
They're coming at him. The O-line isn't even touching these guys. And they're like, oh, Kenny spun into another sack. Do you think it's a problem? A linebacker came through the A-gap and didn't get touched?
Didn't get touched.
That's the problem. So, everybody kind of points to those, there's a couple screenshots where Kenny missed a touchdown or whatever. Hey, he was a rookie. That's going to happen. That's going to happen. You need to have this guy grow. So, for him to not even get, I truly don't believe he got a real chance in Pittsburgh. And I think it's going to haunt the Steelers. I really do. Because, you're banking on a first round pick next year in that next draft. Hey, first round picks aren't they're not a guarantee. At best, they're 50-50. At best, they're 50-50. And mind you, he was a late first round pick. It's not like they traded up and risked their entire future and mortgaged on Kenny Pickett. No, they didn't. He was a late first round pick. Took a flyer on him. Things just drive me in. All the rumors that were spread about him.
Yeah, which weren't true. I mean, I just
completely out of line. They didn't try ruining the kid's career. They tried ruining his life. It was super weird. So I'm gonna have my guys back. I always laugh on Twitter. If I see a Steeler fan, I'll click on their profile and they'll have me blocked. And it's like, I annoyed you so bad that because when Justin Fields would spin into a sack or Justin Fields threw a bad interception, I would do the exact same thing they did to Kenny Pickett. Oh, you don't like it with this guy? Why come it was fair game with Kenny Pickett? The double standard was crazy to me.
And also, too, the love affair with Mason Rudolph, that's the same guy that got benched for Devlin Hodges. And he tied the Detroit Lions. 2 years prior. I mean, it was so bad. And then, Roethlisberger had a very horrible relationship. I heard a lot of stories about those two in that quarterback room, which were so bad. Those two just didn't like each other. I think Mason's a great guy overall. I have no problem with him, no quarrel with him, personally. But the love affair with that, I mean, it was just like, what can we do?
It's one of those things. They were just looking for anybody other than Pickett to do well. People forget when Kenny got injured. Now, I will say the one problem in Kenny's game, he gets injured a lot. You have to be available. So he certainly does get injured a lot. But I think was it the Patriots game that year? It was like in November. They put in Mitch Trubisky. It was the worst quarterback showing I've ever seen. I remember tweeting out the city of Pittsburgh should spend an entire front page ad. We apologize to Kenny Pickett, and it got like 1,200 retweets on it because they were that bad on offense. Mason Rudolph goes in, he throws a couple touchdowns, and people think that he's the second coming of Joe Montana. Give me a break. I mean, he had 1 year in Tennessee. Tennessee said, yeah, you know what? You better get out of here. Go sign a small deal with the Steelers. They love you so much.
Yeah. They literally cut him after a year. I mean, it was so bad. And I honestly, what I felt horrible about down at Tennessee, I don't like Tennessee, but I felt bad for Tyler Boyd, who was there, who hurt his numbers. He's not signed yet, which I think that an NFL team not signing Tyler Boyd right now for a good contract is beyond me. I think he's that good of a player. I think he's a multiple year 1,000-yard receiver. Why the Steelers haven't signed him, but then again,
I'm surprised the Bengals didn't make a run at him because that locker room loved Tyler Boyd, and they could probably get him for $1.5 million. They could get him dirt cheap.
Or even like, for instance, you look at Cleveland. Cleveland brings on Deontay Johnson because of the money issues because of Deshaun Watson, which will go down as forever the worst trade in the National Football League. And that contract, I mean, that just absolutely buried them. But then again, that's why they're the Cleveland Browns. It is what it is. Lost you there, Karlo, with the screen. But I think overall, when you look at it from a different aspect of just the team overall, it's been kind of an issue. And I think that I'm just kind of shocked that Tyler Boyd has not been on there as of yet. We lost Karlo there for a quick second here with the screen. But I think that we've answered a couple of those questions on there. He'll certainly be back here in 2 seconds. But if you guys have a question for Karlo, super chat it now because we're coming towards the end of the show here. If we have any more questions here, I know for a fact. There we go. There he is.
Sorry, got a phone call and it bumped me off.
So we'll get one more. We'll get a couple questions here, and then we'll let you go. Obviously, I appreciate your time as always. I mean,
no problem at all. This was a blast. I wish I didn't get that phone call. It bumped me off.
Let me see here. There was a question in here that I thought was pretty good. Again, if you want to get your question up here quickly, guys, super chat down below. There was a question here. From Jake, who I appreciate always coming onto the show. Karlo, would you ever go back to working for Pitt, and what would it take for that to happen? This is a great question. That's why I saw this.
Not to, I don't know how I want to go about this. Let's just say that they've reached out a couple times about some job openings. I think my college football days are done. I said at the beginning of the show, I'm a high school football guy. That's really the reality of it. I love everything that I'm doing with WPIAL Insider. I have a podcast. I have a nice little TV show. I'm all in on that. I've had even in the last couple months, you know, I had some serious job offers to run recruiting departments as well. I'm good. I don't like the salary cap of college football. I don't like the way that it has gone. That's just my personal opinion. Guess what? If you don't like something, you can remove yourself from it. In 2023, I started to notice, the kids coming to campus. Well, how much am I getting paid? I have nothing to do with that. I feel like, I felt like my job was recruiting a kid to get him to Pitt. And at the end of the day, it's coming down to money and not my execution. I don't like that. So I had to take a step back. And I'm happy I did. I don't think I would ever go back to Pitt. For me to come back to Pitt, it would have to be a very specific scenario. It would have to be Pat Narduzzi retires, Jason Candle from Toledo comes to Pitt, and I get hired as like the GM or assistant GM of the team. That would be the only way to go about it. I would say that's more than a long shot. It's a very specific scenario, but that is kind of it. And that's not to say I don't like Pat Narduzzi, because I love Pat Narduzzi. But I got out of college football. I didn't like the hours, and I didn't like how many days you had to work.
Yep. And then obviously you're certainly very successful in the business world right now with what you're doing. And obviously that kind of drove that same exact thing is kind of what drove Charlie Partridge to go to the National Football League.
Yeah,
but,
it's happening a lot. Just in Pittsburgh, you've seen it a couple times, but throughout the college football world, I have a lot of buddies that got out of college football just because the days and hours worked. It's not worth it, and it just comes down to money anyway. If it came down to execution, I would still be in college football. I lived for that. Comes down to money. Okay, well, what am I not going to all my family's weddings for? Why am I missing all my buddies' bachelor parties? For what? Because a kid can now demand $100,000 on an official visit?
Yeah.
Not for me. Sorry.
And I think that kind of, we talk about Charlie Partridge. I think, for people wondering always about that, I think the only way Charlie Partridge would ever come back to college football is if, again, Narduzzi retired. There was a head coach opening that was possibly there. I personally think he'd be a tremendous head football coach anywhere in the Power Four. I thought he was a scapegoat down at FAU. Lane Kiffin won with his players, and that's a whole nother debacle. That's how much I love Charlie, and I would do anything in the world for the guy if he ever came back to Pitt.
Lane went on record many times thanking Charlie Partridge for all those players he got. He was like, we wouldn't have won without Charlie Partridge. Yeah. So at least Lane had enough thoughts to at least give Charlie some credit there.
Yeah. And take a guess. Last year, Kevin Colbert used a top 3 pick on an offensive line aside from Green and Okafor, which I agree with. We used Kendrick Green as the potential future coming at center, and he was so bad at center. That was just an absolute joke. They moved him to fullback at some point, and that's just the Steelers in general. But
yeah.
Well, I don't see any Super Jack comments in here. Carlo, I can't thank you enough for joining, man. You're here for an hour and 12 minutes. Holy hell, man. I can't thank you enough.
I wish I wouldn't have gotten bumped off, but yeah, whenever you want me back, this was great. We could do a Q&A with some chatters one night. I love talking ball, love talking WPIAL, love talking Pitt. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. I thank you for having me on.
Well, I can assure you this, you will certainly be back on, because anytime you are more than welcome to come on here. It's always enlightening. I can tell you this from the comment section, and people took this as a very enlightening conversation because, one, it's a real conversation. There's no fluff. There's no media bullshit. It's straightforward. So
yeah,
appreciate you guys. If you're in there right now, if you're over on X, Facebook, whatever, head over to YouTube, hit the like button down below, hit subscribe. They're both free. Appreciate all the support. The show is what it is because of you guys. We do this because it's fun. I can tell you that right now. I'm certainly not making anything from this. So besides the sponsors,
hey,
this is pretty much.
There's not money in high school football. That's what I tell people. They're like, oh, well, there's not much money in high school football. I still got a nice 9 to 5.
Guys, we have a great life outside of this, but guess what? We do this for the love of WPIAL football and Pitt football. That's why we do this, and we do it for you guys, and appreciate for all you guys tuning in to another episode of Talking College Football with JJ Kitchen. From myself and Carlo, as always, hail to Pitt, and we'll see you next time.